Thank you so much for joining me today, Sage. I'm very excited to get to talk to you today. And we're going to be exploring pedagogy and the science and art of actually teaching a class and how to do that. So one thing that you've said, because you have a very rich academic career in teaching as well, you found that this originally ended up meaning that people were suffering in your yoga classes a bit. Was there a specific event that made you realize this, or was it just gradual? Like, how did you figure that out?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Adrienne. I'm so glad to be here. Yes, as you say, I have a background, a PhD in English literature. So I was teaching composition courses during graduate school and then lecturing on contemporary literature. And the kind of things that you would do if you were setting up a university class don't really apply to the yoga classroom. And, funny, an alternative track I had also teaching was teaching spinning classes, so indoor cycling classes. And I always reflect how, like, the college classroom experience, the spinning class experience, and the yoga class experience have very different goals and very different student-teacher interactions. Like in spinning, if the students were sweating and gritting their teeth, I was doing a great job, right? And I wouldn't want to see that from my yoga students, nor would I want to see it from my college freshmen in the composition course. In an academic setting, you lay out a very clear syllabus, a framework of where you're going, both over the course of the semester and also over the course of every class. And you evaluate yourself, and your students evaluate you on ratemyprofessors.com on how well you achieved those goals and how warmly you led them. But mostly, like, did the class achieve what it said it was going to? And that is not a framework you can apply to a yoga class in the same way. There isn't a destination, there's no grading, there shouldn't be evaluation. And trying to take the things that I had been taught professionally and wedge them into a yoga classroom was definitely causing suffering for me and probably causing suffering for my students, because I felt like everybody needed to be almost in lockstep, that I wasn't doing my job well unless everybody was following all of my directions all the time, which might be true if you were leading like a biology lab, you would want, or a chemistry lab, even worse. You'd need for the students to be following your directions. But in yoga, it's really about the student's experience. It's not about achieving any particular outcome or mastery of the material. There's no evaluation, no test at the end of the class or at the end of the quarter or semester. So once I came to realize that this was a very different paradigm to operate under, then I started to see, oh, I don't have to plan quite so much. It's okay to repeat things. If you're teaching literature, you don't want to have deliver the same lecture every, week of the 16 weeks of the semester. That would be very strange. But I could see a pretty good argument for working around one base yoga sequence across 16 weeks of time. So there was a real, as there is for people who have had any career prior to becoming a yoga teacher, a real unlearning that had to happen in order for me to, I think, be a better servant to my students and a better teacher to my students.
Yeah, there's no A plus in yoga.
Yeah, exactly.
And then once you sort of realized this and you realized that you needed to have a new strategy that didn't have to be so structured, did you, how did you approach developing your new style? Or
So I do remember back in the day early on, I literally wrote out a syllabus. Like there was like, this is what we're going to do every week. And there wasn't much overlap from week to week. And that is following this model, like I said, that you would deliver in a university setting or in a secondary school setting, even where there's like a clear beginning and a clear end and very little repetition. What I have found works way better with our yoga students is to have a whole lot of repetition and only minor variation from week to week. Because that's where they actually get to embody the learning and feel it and get out of their heads and into their bodies, which is the whole point of the class.
and how could you tell with your students, like what was the change for them, and how did you know the new model was resonating more?
Yeah, a great thing to see is the students moving to the next pose in the sequence as you have been teaching it before you even call it out. In fact, some of my regular students now, I kind of forget where I was going with some of these sequences, and I'll just look at them and be like, oh, yeah, that's what we do next. So that's this awesome, almost unspoken dialogue that I have with my students as they are having this same kind of monologue within themselves. Like they've learned the patterns, and they can then, like I said, get out of their head and thinking what goes where and what comes next, and really drop into their bodies in a good way. So that's a good tell, is when you see your students moving ahead of your cueing into something that intuitively comes next.
So do you have the exact same sequence every class for that
No, I
class, or
use
do you
the
mix it
same
up?
template class to class. So I use two analogies to describe this. One is that it's like a base recipe, and then maybe we're going to change out the ingredients a little bit, but the recipe would stay the same. So say I'm making a pasta or I'm making an omelet. That has the same constituent ingredients for the most part from week to week, but maybe we're changing the vegetables in the pasta or the omelet a little bit from week to week, because that's what's in season, or there's somebody there who has an aversion or a food allergy to something that I planned on cooking. Easy enough to swap it out or leave it out, or for them to just pick it out and skip that part of class. The other analogy I often use is it's like developing a capsule wardrobe or packing for a trip. Like you would have a few base pieces, your little black dress, your jeans and your white shirt. And those are the things that you know you're going to be wearing multiple days over your trip, or they're the elements of your capsule wardrobe. But then you accessorize and you add a scarf or jewelry or a blazer or change your shoes to go from day to night. So the base elements are the same, but there are definitely minor variations, if only to keep yourself interested, but also to keep your students from falling too far into what I previously presented to you as a good thing, where they move ahead of the cueing. You don't want them to tune out so much that they're just kind of going through the motions and not feeling their way through things.
I guess you also want them the sense that they're in a class community setting to a certain degree, rather than just doing the practice at home that they could just repeat on their own if they wanted.
Exactly, exactly.
Do you have any tips for anyone who's trying to figure out whether their teaching style is resonating? Because I know it's very common. We can ask for feedback. That is obviously the ideal way to go about it. But people tend to be very polite as well, and often will say, "Oh, it's great," even when maybe it isn't. So, do you have any tips for either getting a real answer from people, or is there anything that you can observe in the classes that resonates? Maybe for teachers that they're wondering what to do because they have people not coming back, and they're like, what's not resonating? Something's not landing. How can I figure this out?
Yeah, I think it ties into what I've already said about the value of repetition. I think your students like your class more when it is familiar and it feels cozy. Just like, again, to wedge a food analogy in here, if you go to a restaurant, have a first encounter at that restaurant, like it enough to come back a second time, then you want it to be pretty similar menu, because maybe you want to order what your dining companion had, or you want the exact same thing that you had the last time. That's how I order on restaurants. Once I find something I like I want it always there because I went there to eat it. We as teachers, we think, oh, I've got to make it exciting and fresh every time, but that's simply not so. So if you have the opportunity for your students to come back once, then you need to give them what they were expecting, which is almost exactly the same thing, but with maybe a few little flavor twists. So that they feel like their expectations were met, they feel satisfied, and then they will keep coming back. As you say, students often will lie to you or just be polite and say, oh, that was great. And that doesn't mean anything. Your students are not going to give you particularly good feedback. In fact, if you're doing your job really well as a yoga teacher, they're going to be nonverbal after class. And it's often the students who leave in a hurry and don't politely say, oh, that was so nice to you. They're the ones who had the most profound experience. And they're the ones who write you later and say, oh, that class was just what I needed today. You wind up thinking to yourself, really, because your face was implying that you hated it, but you can never tell. It's pretty wild. Like I said, if I looked out on my spinning classroom and saw furrowed brows, that was a good thing. If I look out on my college classroom and see furrowed brows, that is not a good thing. If I look out on my yoga students and see it, that just should mean nothing to me. It should be a neutral thing. That's somebody's thinking face, or they're like having a revelation face, or just like their time for more Botox face. Like the students' expressions don't really give you feedback either. It's that they come back again and again. I think the best way to get them coming back is to deliver a pretty regular class from week to week so that they get what they came for. I also feel like it's important to have a community of peers, whether it's folks that you went through teacher training with, or you have a mentor at the places where you teach, or you have an online community like the one I offer, where you can share experiences and get feedback from people who know how to deliver that feedback because they know how the class was constructed. Again, there's a food analogy at play here. It's like if you were a chef developing a recipe, you wouldn't really be able to get great feedback from a team of hungry rugby players, right? Like teenage rugby players. You wouldn't put your like dish in progress in front of them and ask them to deliver you really useful feedback on it. They're just gonna go, eat it all up and say, oh, delicious. They can't give you that feedback, but other chefs can. And that's why you would want to work with the people in your kitchen or work with somebody else at another restaurant in order to get the kind of nuanced feedback that will really level you up. You need to talk to somebody who knows the deep structures and the profession from the inside out instead of as simply a receiver of yoga classes. Somebody who can deliver yoga classes can always give you the best feedback. So that was a very long-winded way, Adrienne, of saying, ask your friends, ask your friends, ask your colleagues, tap into your Sangha.
That's good advice. I luckily have one of my regular students is a very good friend of mine, so I can always ask her, and she doesn't have the industry experience, but she can be very blunt, or it's never anything mean, but it's like, oh, I liked this more, or I didn't really like that part or something, so that's been very helpful. So I recommend even
Right,
if you
bring
can
your
get
own
someone
taste
like that.
tester.
Yeah.
Bring your own taste tester with you. My daughter is now 24, and she's not living near me anymore. But when she was, she would come to my class regularly, and then we would drive back home afterward. And I would always get some feedback about things I said that were hokey or didn't make sense, or things that didn't feel great in her body. And I usually, maybe 2/3 of the time, agree and think, yeah, she's absolutely right. And the times when I didn't think her feedback worked for me was because she was a 20-year-old woman, and the majority of my students are 55-year-old men who run long distances. So it's like, yeah, that's a physical thing. That's not an energy thing or a verbal skills thing. But I think that's a great idea. Bring your friend to class, get that like secret shopper, bring her with you so that you can get some feedback like that, because your students can't really give you that.
Yeah. You also talked about at the start about making things like regular and keeping it like a routine. Where do you think this desire to always change sequences comes from?
I have a couple theories. One is just the truth that you are the only one who has ever been in every yoga class you ever taught. And you're the only one who's ever heard everything to come out of your mouth. And therefore, you're kind of sick of hearing yourself say the same things in the same ways. So if you are interested in growing, you feel like you need to change it up. But that's a focus on the teacher ego and the self and not on the students. And I'm always trying to center the students over myself. Another is that as practitioners who have come up to the level of also being yoga teachers, we are hungry for freshness, and we love when we go to a class and everything is new and we're learning something, because again, we've just been exposed to the canon of poses and the way that they can be mixed together so many times that it's exciting to eat something new. Another is this, especially since 2020, as we all got more used to consuming online content, we think, oh, the video has to be new every time. Like you wouldn't record the same sequence without changes for video. You'd just play that video again. So I think that this has somehow wormed into our brains and thinking, oh, it needs to be different every time. And it really doesn't. I know I go and watch videos over and over, follow along movement videos over and over, because I like them. But we don't think that way when we're teaching a live class. Like, oh, this is like really, people can just watch this video again. They like it. There might be a few minor tweaks. The lighting is different. If you use music, maybe the music is different. You could use props slightly differently, but it doesn't need to be wholesale fresh and new every time.
Yeah, that's a good point. I pretty much do the exact same yoga nidra class, like audio to at bedtime every
And
day.
that's
I
part of
mix it
why
up a
it,
little bit, but
yeah, that's part of why it works is that it's familiar, it's soothing to your nervous system. We have so much coming at us all the time, all day long. It's really nice to get something that is meeting your expectations and delivering what you wanted it to. And if that means it's exactly the same thing, why does The Office do so well in reruns? Because people get soothed by seeing something, they know how it works, they know how it's going to end.
And that's what people are coming to your yoga class for, ultimately, is that soothing aspect where they're not getting everything
Totally.
thrown
I
at
mean,
you.
imagine you could only listen to any piece of music once and then you couldn't listen to it again. That wouldn't be fun. No, and our brains are wired to thrive on that repetition. We want the familiarity. We don't need to have it always be experimental jazz that you only hear once and never hear again. You want your Taylor Swift or whatever. You want your golden oldies. You want the classics and you want to hear them over and over and over.
And you're also going to get a deeper experience because, like you mentioned, you then know what's coming next. So you can feel it in your body rather than getting stuck in your head, like, oh, what did she say? Like, oh, where am I putting my hand? That kind of thing. Then you can actually move through it and get closer to experiencing yoga.
Right on.
Where do you find that teachers get the most stuck when they're guiding students through a class?
I think that this is an example of where our strengths as practitioners can often be our weaknesses as teachers. I think that it can be easy, even if people who are yoga teachers say, I'm not very flexible. Yeah, you are. You were flexible enough to like not run screaming from your first yoga class. So you have this natural talent already. And I think that gets developed and we forget what it's like to be a beginner. And we then might presume that our students are having a similar experience to what we feel in our own bodies. And I think the flip side of that is that we think the things that we are self-conscious about, our age or our bum shoulder or our falling out of balance pose, we think that those are weaknesses, but really those are our superpowers as yoga teachers, that the things that we had to struggle with are the things that we can break down and share with other people who had the same struggles. Whereas the things that came naturally to us, being able to drop right into the splits or whatever, being able to follow the teacher's cue, count for breath exercises, which still can't do. I've been practicing yoga for a long time and I'm always like, nope, that count doesn't work for me. Can't do it like that. No, like recognizing those struggles is giving us insight into how we can help our students best. And just skating by on our strengths is not going to make us good teachers. So I think yoga teachers get too hung up on what they perceive to be their weaknesses. And instead, I just want to like give them a little makeover, take off the glasses and say, look, you're beautiful. Like this was beautiful. You really know how to help people who are in that same situation as you. And you don't need to try to act like it all comes easily to you. Those are the things that you can't really teach very well.
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful reminder to everyone. And in terms of the actual teaching portion, where do people get really stuck in terms of like being in the classroom, in front of a classroom, and helping to guide them?
I think, especially when teachers are newer and self-conscious, they get stuck in relying a little too much on their own practice and doing their practice at the front of the room, almost practicing at their students instead of directing their students' practice. And I get it because it's a lot of work to describe something, especially if you're mirroring, like to do it and describe it and try to guide people into it. That's a whole lot to handle. So I think teachers can get kind of stuck on their mat like that, dropping into a practice. Maybe they're feeling a little shy or self-conscious where they go into child's pose and they keep their head down instead of just showing the pose and popping right up to put eyes on their students. Or they practice with their eyes closed or with their back to the students for longer than is necessary just to demonstrate maybe a hand clasp behind your back or something. So I think an over-reliance on demonstrating can be a problem for teachers at every level, but especially at the newer level. On the other hand, I think there are some great reasons to do demo. I'm not saying you shouldn't demo. I think there are student populations where demo is absolutely the only way to go. And that trying to force yourself off the mat is only going to get you even more in your head and less in service of your students. So please don't take that the wrong way. I think teachers get caught up in over cueing, saying too much. Again, probably out of some kind of crisis of confidence or self-consciousness, or just excitement to share this practice that they love so much. You wind up saying everything you ever learned about how to come into Warrior 2, and you say it all on the first side, and then the second side, you just breeze in and out because you've got nothing left to say. So I think cueing and timing go together hand in hand like that. We don't want to overload our students and keep them in their heads by talking too much about what goes where. We can show them visually, yes, demo the pose. We can give them 2 or 3 cues to help them get there. Maybe tell them why are we doing this, where they might be feeling it, and then we can just zip it. Because teaching yoga is not delivering a speech to the UN. It is not running a podcast or a radio show. There's no such thing as dead air. And your students are coming to class expressly for the quiet. They're not coming for all your bon mot and all the fabulous things you have to say. They really want you to shut up and let them drop in. Just so say just enough and no more.
That's a challenge that I've been practicing as a yin yoga teacher because there's long stretches of silence and you're like, have I been quiet for too long? Do I need to say something? Finding that balance is a fine art.
I learned a great acronym from one of my students in a yin yoga teacher training that I was leading. So this is especially important for yin. She's like, oh yeah, it's weight and waste. And I was like, wait, what do these mean? Wait, why am I talking? So before you feel the urge to open your mouth, think, why am I talking? And then after you answer that, waste, why am I still talking? Like, can I get out with just like short and sweet, say only what needs to happen, and then zip it? It is a real practice, especially in yin, but that's what your students need.
Yeah, I'll remember that. That's a good tip. You also talk a lot about clear language. Where do you think, apart from when you're actually having to say something, what makes yoga instruction very clear versus starting to get a bit confusing for students?
One thing is overloading, again, just with the sound of your voice. An exercise that I give to people in my mentorship program, I think everybody should do this. I think it's the number one thing that you can do to get better as a teacher. Record yourself, listen to the recording, or record yourself, watch the recording. And what we can do now so easily with our AI friends is record yourself, transcribe the recording. It used to be I would have to like get people to type it up themselves. Let me tell you, you learn your filler words right away when you have to type them out and transcribe your own class. But our AI friends can tell us this too. What you will quickly see in the black and white there of your transcript is that you say things like, and now from here, we're gonna, often all 3 together, but none of those are necessary. Simply saying, inhale, raise your arms, not, and now from here, we're going to inhale, raise our arms. Like, no, just say, inhale, raise your arms. Inhale, arms up. Fewer words is better. Again, it's not radio. We're not trying to fill time. We're not getting paid by the word. In fact, our students are going to have the better experience if we can self-edit pretty ruthlessly and take out a lot of that filler that just doesn't need to be there. So say the bare minimum you can to get your students to follow enough where it looks like they're having a good time and they keep coming back to your class. So that's number one for clear cueing, is like go through with a machete, cut out all the underbrush. There is so much more going on in your class that you could just get rid of, just words that could go and not be replaced. Another thing is, again, like 2 or 3 cues on one side, maybe 1 or 2 cues on the second side. Students understand where you're going with things. Get in, get out, let the silence speak for itself. Yet another thing is to practice, practice, practice saying these cues. The more you say them, the more refined they're going to be. So if you are coming back to that initial problem of teachers trying to overcomplicate things and like plan a whole new class every time, it's going to be so much harder to be concise with your cueing if it's the first time you've said it. But if you've said it 30 times or even 5 times, it's already going to be a lot clearer.
That's a good tip that reinforces that repetition. What's a common cue that yoga teachers tend to use that's very fluffy or poetic, but in reality absolutely makes no sense? Maybe some, is there any that like absolutely bug you? I'm sure there's heaps. I can't remember. I said one the other day in my class and I was like, that made no sense when I think about it.
Well, I mean, we hear like swan dive, reverse swan dive all the time. I'm not so mad about that. I'm just thinking about things that everybody says. The open your heart is a little confusing to me. I always think of open heart surgery, so that gets a little graphic really quick in my brain. I do think there are some phrases that get overused. One that particularly irks me, but this is really just like Sage's pet peeve. Don't feel like you're a bad teacher for saying it. Is like let go of that which no longer serves you. That gets on my nerves because I I feel like it implies that stuff is here to serve us. And it's not like I don't want to center myself and be like, oh, here I am the queen and everything is just here to like improve my reality. No, sometimes stuff just sucks and that's how it is. And you can't always let go of things that no longer serve you. Sometimes you're married to them or parenting them or caretaking them, and it's just a moment that they're not serving you. But on the whole, they're good to have around. I do appreciate the cue because it goes back to what I said, like take the machete, cut out the underbrush, get rid of what you don't need anymore, I think is a clearer way to say that. But that's just my little tirade.
That's a good one. I like that one. It's a good way of thinking about it. And you also use a lot of food analogies, which I have noticed in this episode as well. And you've used it throughout your class descriptions. How can we use creative language to have fun in our classes and be clear in our cues while we're still trying to cut everything out and be really clear?
Yeah, I think that a judicious use of metaphor and simile is really a fantastic thing. So that's why I'm always going to town with the food stuff. And in fact, instead of saying, I don't say like progress this or regress this movement or to make it harder or to make it easier. I say like make it spicier, make it sweeter. It's also a personal branding thing. Like that's a good thing to do. I think that there are some things you can say that are just super evocative. Like one of my favorite teachers, gosh, I remember it is easily 22 years ago that I heard her say this, and I still take class with her. She said, "Going to yoga is like you're taking the pasta noodle and it's so stiff, and then you put it in the hot water, and it gets softer." And she's like, "So let's approach this like we're softening the pasta. Like you don't want to just like come in and try to like make it soft. You have to give it time to soften in the water." So a few cues like that, I think, can go a really long way, can be fantastic. I also think that at the far end of this almost flight of fancy and metaphor, you can overuse words that are really evocative and help folks visualize and really land in people's bodies at first use. Like I have a friend who used the word slice a lot, like slice your arm through the air. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. But then like the fifth time you hear it in the course of a single practice, it's like, oh, it lost all its weight. I call them like $20 words. Like you can use one or two $20 words per class, but then I think it's useful to instead rely for the most part on $1 words. And this is, of course, like everything that we teach, like this is me teaching myself because as somebody who loves words as a writer, I like often I'm deploying these big words in class. And the few times that I have had, not few times, but when I have an ESL speaker in class, I don't know if you use this term down in the Southern Hemisphere, but English is a second language. It's like, okay, these words are not great. Like I'm being too fancy and it's really just me pleasing my teacher ego or my word loving brain. It's not great to use these big words. And so I think a good takeaway there is almost treat every class as though is yoga for English speakers as a second language.
That's a good tip. I've got
Mhm.
a couple of my exes, English is their second language, and they really struggle with when you get some fancy words, or if you're using slang words for your location, and then that's like, what are we all talking about here? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a
Um,
fine line because that also is what makes your class fun and unique and really shows your personality.
I mean, it depends on how big your class is as well. Like, presumably, you're going to know that if someone comes in that it is their second language or not. It's going to be different than teaching online. Well, I wanted to dive into um, pedagogy. I knew I was going to say that wrong as soon as we were
Pedagogy.
recording. Thank you. So, what is pedagogy and how is it used by yoga teachers? So we're all clear and on the same page.
Pedagogy is the study of learning. And it's about how learners learn. In fact, all right, don't let me give a lecture here, but pedagogy, you know, the agi from like biology, like
Mhm.
that's the study part. And the ped part is like from pediatrics. It means children, like how children learn. So really what we're talking about, unless you're teaching kids yoga explicitly, is andragogy, how grown-ups learn. So anyway,
Mhm.
down off of my lecture podium here. So when we're talking about pedagogy in terms of yoga, we're thinking about like what are our learning objectives, you know, where's the class going, and how can we deliver the material in a way that makes sense for this unique group of learners. And this harkens right back to our quick discussion just now about ESL speakers in class. You know, like they're going to need a slightly different pedagogical approach than a group of sorority sisters, you know, who all share the same pop culture knowledge. And that class might say you're teaching a bridal party, right? A bachelorette party or something like that, a hen do. That's going to be a very different kind of language. And you would even do different things in that class. You might do partner yoga, and you might have an open your heart playlist, you know, to go along with the wedding theme. But so pedagogy is thinking through what set of classroom management techniques can I use to deliver the best experience for the students who I expect to be there? And you're never going to please everybody. I think you know my tagline is like, I'm here to help you become almost everyone's favorite teacher and to include almost everyone in class. Because if you're teaching an open class, you cannot control every variable. And you're never going to be everyone's favorite. We just want to create the best experience for the students who we expect to be there. And depending on where you're teaching, you might have a whole lot of control over that. Or as you say, if you're teaching online and it's an open channel on YouTube, anybody could stumble across your video. And we just want to make it as inclusive as possible while recognizing we're never going to please absolutely everyone.
Mhm. And you have developed a few frameworks to help with this structuring your class and developing one's the 642 method. How does this work? How does this apply to a class? You've got 6 moves of the spine, 4 lines of the hip, 2 core modes, and how did you develop it? How does it help um, structure the class and keep in mind how people are learning?
Yeah, great question. So the 6 moves of the spine is something that most of us are familiar with because you do it in almost every warm-up sequence you teach. If you think of the classic cat-cow, that's movement of the spine through flexion and extension. So that right there is your classic forward and back, sagittal plane of motion. And it's also articular movement of the spine in which each of the joints of the spine gets its time to shine. We're moving them in sequence, not stabilizing them. So those are the 2 core modes to jump ahead. So 6 moves of the spine, forward and back, cat and cow, side to side, like your lateral child's pose, where you go back to child's pose and take your arms out to the side, any kind of side bend. And then round and round, movement in the transverse plane, which is like you're threading the needle twist. And that's the basic warm-up sequence you'll see at the start of many vinyasa classes. That is taking you through the 3 planes of motion. Like I said, sagittal plane, forward and back, frontal plane, side to side, transverse plane, round and round. So when we're thinking about putting together a balanced sequence for class, we want to make sure that we're not overemphasizing one of these over the others. And this is the quibble I have with many vinyasa classes. It's like a whole lot of forward folding up and down, up and down, up and down. And I feel like it prioritizes this forward folding action that many of us are stuck in through a lot of the day when we're sitting anyway. And it kind of forgets that the body can move in 3 dimensions and not just in that forward and back plane. So the 6 is a reminder to take your students into side bends to give them opportunities for twists. The 4 might not be as familiar to your listeners because I made it up. It's just like a really handy paradigm to think about the front and back lines of the legs and the inner and outer lines of the legs. And another way you could think about this is how you orient your students in the room on their mats. Do you spend all your time facing the short edge of the mat? Do you spend all your time facing the long edge of the mat? If you're facing the short edge of the mat, you're generally working the front and back lines of the legs, whether you're in a symmetrical shape like a mountain pose, chair pose, or you're in a staggered stance like your warrior pose, crescent lunge, and so on. When you're facing the long edge of the mat, then you're working adductors, abductors, inner line, outer line of the legs. And that is not something that we do quite so much in yoga. In life, we do a lot of in yoga if the class is well sequenced. So that's a way to remind you, don't just stay stuck in that forward plane. Also, be moving around. And then, as I said, the 2 core modes, articulation of the spine, that's the Ripley movement that we often do in warm-up, and stabilization, that's simply asking the muscles of the core to hold the relationship of the spine and pelvis really steady as we maybe do something else, like move an arm or move a leg or move opposite arm and leg, or even get really spicy, move same side arm and leg. When a yoga class has all of those elements, it is satisfying, it is balanced, it doesn't feel like it's relying too much on just perpetuating the stresses that we already have from forward folding in our bodies. So that's a way to structure, kind of gives you like a wardrobe frame that you can kind of build the outfit of your class on, thinking through, am I ticking all of these boxes? Do I have movement forward and back, side to side, round and round for the spine? Yes, yes, yes. Cool. Am I working on the front and back lines of the legs, the inner and outer lines of the legs? Yeah, cool. Are we both getting squirmy and getting steady? Great. Core modes are sorted there. I also feel like you can apply this paradigm to virtually every segment of your class, like the time you spend down on the mat at the beginning in warm up, the time you spend upstanding in your standing sequence, the time you might spend back down on the mat, either to do core work or hip work or both. Each of those kind of has its own 642 in it. So that is the paradigm that I really expound in detail in my book called The Art of Yoga Sequencing. And it's made sense for my brain as like a checklist. To bring the food analogy back in, it's kind of your macronutrients of movement. Like you've got to get those all covered over the course of a day, if not in the course of a single meal, in order for your body to achieve maximum function.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And within this, you advocate a lot for exercise physiology over anatomy pathology. What is the difference between those 2 angles, and how does that change your approach as a teacher to the
Sure.
students' bodies?
For a hot minute, I owned a massage school. COVID killed it, and I am not a massage therapist. I receive a lot of massage because I also own a spa, but lucky me. We had a class, massage schools here in the States have a class called APPK, Anatomy, Physiology, Pathology, and Kinesiology. So anatomy, what bone goes where, how the muscles operate on the joints, naming the pieces of the body. Pathology is like what happens when things go wrong. And I feel like many yoga teacher trainings at the 200-hour level focus a little too much on those 2 elements, on memorizing anatomy and on getting worried about the pathology of like how our students might come in injured, might become injured over the course of class, how we need to know every single modification and contraindication. I had to fill out worksheets. I don't know what your teacher training was like, but like literally worksheets about like people should not do this shape if, and a whole list of scary things. Then the other 2, the P and the K, physiology and kinesiology, are about how our bodies adapt. That's physiology. And kinesiology is how we move through space. So we already talked about that when we talked about the 642. Physiology, in particular, is about how we adapt to the stresses that we choose to put on our bodies through exercise. So it sounds like I've had a million careers because I'm like, oh yes, I was a college lecturer, and for a little while I was an endurance sports coach. Well, a decade I was an endurance sports coach and raced ultra marathons and long distance triathlons myself. So I learned a lot about these principles of exercise physiology, and they're so simple. It's like, oh my gosh, if you had to learn a ton of anatomy and pathology in YTT, and then you're like, wait, I can learn exercise physiology in 5 minutes? It's like, yeah, you can, because it's all a big no duh. Like that totally makes sense. Like the way your body adapts is to choose to apply some kind of stress to it by running 5 miles or running 10K or lifting X amount of weight or doing a particular drill on the tennis court. And then you give your body time to adapt. You give it downtime, it recovers, and it grows back stronger. And that's how you get better at things. And yoga asana is an exercise modality, and it is subject to the principles of physiology. So when we're thinking about that, it's like, oh, how do we tweak the stress variables we put on our athletes in their workouts or our students in an asana class? We can tweak it by intensity, frequency, and duration. Like how long are we holding the pose? That's duration. How many times do we see the pose in the course of a class? That's frequency. And also how many sessions do we practice asana in a week? That's also frequency. If the student is following the teacher's directions to the letter and like holding for the number of breaths and doing every shape, the teacher really fixes those two variables, the duration and the frequency. The only thing the student really has control over is the intensity of like how far they go in their chair pose, you know, where exactly they go in their humble warrior pose, how low into the splits they go, and so on. And when you recognize, oh, that's the only way my students really can find the optimal stress level for them, this chosen stress of undergoing these yoga exercises with the goal of improving strength and flexibility and mobility and balance, if intensity is the only thing that they can control, we need to give them some options and really empower them to make the choices that work for them and not fix that variable too, because then you're trying to fit every peg into a square hole. And it just is not going to work that way.
Yeah, that was actually a lot easier. I thought it was going to be a lot more complicated in terms of like the term exercise physiology.
Exercise physiology. I'll tell you the other two
technical
things to know. Like there's this principle of diminishing returns, right? And this is again, just like a no-brainer. You can be like, yeah, oh, I am an expert in exercise physiology. Like doing a little bit of something can be good, but at some point, too much is not better. And this is true in yin yoga. This is true in vinyasa yoga. This is true in weightlifting. This is true in distance running. You know, there comes a point where you could keep putting in the work, but you are not going to get return on that investment. Like, yeah, we know this to be true, but sometimes we forget that. We go to yoga and we're like, I just need to stay longer. I need to push deeper. I need to go again. No, your body needs the rest in order to adapt to the stressors that you put on. The other principle to know is the principle of specificity, which just means in order to get better at doing something, you need to practice doing that thing and not different things. So cross-training is not the way to get your best marathon time. Running is the way to get your best marathon time. Bench pressing is not the way to get your best marathon time. Running is the way to get your best marathon time. And like, yeah, duh. But then again, if our goal of going to yoga is to be more present for our families and put more love out into the world, like doing splits isn't necessarily going to be the fastest way to achieve that. Practicing metta meditation might be a better way to achieve it. The principle of specificity.
That ties back in with practicing our cueing as well. We're not going to get better at cueing for a certain pose if we're changing it every single week and we're never repeating our classes.
Exactly.
How can following the 6-4-2 framework help us incorporate this exercise physiology into our classes sort of naturally to give us a bit of structure?
642 works a little more on the kinesiology side of things, but it is a way to just make sure that things are balanced so that we aren't applying too much stress. It's the principle of diminishing returns again. Like I said, if you take a student who's been sitting all day in their desk and drive to the yoga studio and just do a bunch of forward folding with them or a ton of sun salutations, which typically have a lot of forward folding, now we're just piling on the wrong kind of stress. And what we want instead is to, sure, give them a tiny bit of that, but also move their body in every other available direction so that we have better balance and we're not just like butting up against that limit of the principle of diminishing returns, instead giving them a more well-rounded movement practice.
You also have a serve method. Can you
Yeah.
explain that?
That's a food analogy too, Adrienne.
Yay.
It is a way of, it's a little mnemonic, serve, SERVE. So you want to structure your class, but based on sound physiology and kinesiology, as we just covered, that's the S. The first E is then you need to experience it as a student. I know it's easy to spend all your available planning time actually doing the planning and not practicing the practice, but unless you have tasted this food before you send it out of your kitchen, you are doing your students a big disservice. So I want teachers to feel like they can embody this practice, like they have learned how to do these transitions. They have felt how this feels as they have written it. So it's like practice your recipe yourself. Our repetition, repeat it over time, repeat it with purpose so that you feel like you've really mastered the things you want to say, the order in which things go, and your students then will have the same experience because that repetition is the key to their learning. V, vary with intention. Yes, it's good to change things. I'm not saying, oh, we should all just have this one signature sequence and that's what we teach all the time. No, it's good to change things up. We just want to do it with intention, both from week to week across the class and in offering maybe 2, maybe 3 variations on each pose in class if it looks like the students would benefit from it. So that's about having eyes on your students. And the second E, the last E in serve, is to evolve your voice over time, to give yourself permission to grow, to give yourself permission to change from the teacher you once were into the teacher you're becoming, to work with your peers on getting feedback, if you can get it from them, to work with your students on getting feedback, and to let yourself let go of what no longer serves you as a teacher, ha ha ha, but really like let go of what isn't working for you anymore. You're free to change your mind, you're free to change your style, and you're free to grow into the teacher who can serve your unique student population best.
Nice. And how do you find it benefits the teachers when they start to incorporate some of these methods and frameworks into their teaching?
It can take the planning time from more time than it takes to teach the class to just minutes. And then you can get to spend your time practicing, which is probably one of your favorite things to do anyway. You can just emphasize that first E, the experience part. When you're trying to make it fresh and new every time, when you're trying to figure out how poses are going to go together into a balanced sequence without having any framework to hang it on, you wind up spinning your wheels a lot and taking a lot more time planning than is necessary. When you can instead start to lean on the repetition and redoing this great, not rewriting the same great structure from week to week, but repeating it for your students, doing it over and over, that's when you really step into your confidence as a teacher. Your cueing gets clearer. You don't have to demo so much because you remember how to cue it because you cued it that way last time too. Everybody wins. Your students keep coming back. Your planning time is lower. You got more students in class. That means you're making more money. You're spending less time planning, which means you're also making more money if you think of time planning as part of your earning ratio there. So it's a win-win.
That makes sense. I can definitely see how it would boost your confidence a lot just with understanding your content even more and being able to practice it.
Absolutely. And that confidence is what really keeps your students coming back. It's not that you're perfect. It's not that that was the coolest, new, fresh sequence. It's like, I came to the class expecting to get what I got. I even got a little more because there was a little variation. We used a strap this time and we didn't use a strap last time. And that was kind of cool. And that brought my attention to this new area. But the teacher was dependable. I trusted them. They seemed to know what they were doing. Therefore, I felt safe to really drop into my own practice. That's the key to returning students.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. This has been awesome. Thank you so much. For anyone that is listening that wants to connect with you and learn a little bit more of these frameworks and tools, how can you help teachers and where can they find you?
I am all over the place. My name is Sage Rountree with no letter D in my last name, so that's the germane thing. Sage, ROUNTREE.com. I'm at Sage Rountree on all the socials and on YouTube as well. And I have a virtual studio called Comfort Zone Yoga. It's focused on teacher development, and there's a big free space in there called The Zone. I have a lot of mini courses in there. One is on finding your confidence, one is on finding your voice, one is on Workshops 101, like I developed for you for the All Mats Taken Summit. There's a sequence demo library. There are templates. So if you're like, oh, this kind of sounds like an interesting way to plan my class, I'd like to see the template. Come through, pick up the template, got a bunch of checklists in there. It's a very robust free space because I'm a giver. What can I say? No, truly, there's a ton in there. I've just been having so much fun building it out. So that is at comfortzoneyoga.com. It's totally free to join. So you can just hit that URL and click through from there. Also offer a monthly live call in there on a variety of topics. And then I have a bunch of paid offerings in there as well. My big umbrella offering is the 300-hour yoga teacher training, but I have a mentorship program that constitutes half of that people can do just on their own. You will not be surprised to know that has a culinary theme. It's called Mastering the Art of Yoga Sequencing. It's a Julia Child themed mentorship membership because Julia's famous book was Mastering the Art of French Cooking. And that's where we really go deep into the 642. I give you the recipes. It's like getting a meal kit service, right? Here's the recipe for the month. I cooked it for you. You practice it with me. Then we workshop together on how to adapt it for your unique population. And we have a whole 6-month curriculum to help teachers really build their confidence so they can create that held container that keeps their students coming back.
Awesome. And I can imagine there's so much value in there. Your presentation you did for the summit was awesome. That was one of my personal favorite presentations. So thank you for that. I love all of these food analogies as well. I'm a big foodie. Right. Before I let you go, I do have a couple of rapid fire questions for you. So what is one marketing strategy for your yoga teaching that has worked better than you expected it to?
Well, I should have expected it would work, but it goes back to this almost, how to become almost everyone's favorite yoga teacher. You're not going to do it. And the more specific you can get about who you want to serve, the more they're going to be able to find you because your messaging becomes a whole lot more clear. You teach from those self-perceived weaknesses that are really your strengths. So as I said, I was an endurance athlete, coached endurance sports. My specialty is in yoga for athletes. So when I teach a class that is specific for athletes, that class always fills because it is unique enough of a niche that the people who are drawn to it can easily find it. SEO, word of mouth, and I know how to teach it because I lived being both a long distance runner and a yoga practitioner at the same time. And it's a unique body that has to balance those two things. So niching down is the very short answer to my long-winded answer.
It makes sense. And because it's 2025, I have to ask, we have actually talked a little bit about this, but what AI are you using in your business and what have you found valuable as a business owner?
I love it. I have so much fun with AI. I use both ChatGPT, where I've built a bunch of custom bots. And this is not just for my business, but for the yoga studio I own, for the spa I own. We have bots to help us with writing the newsletters in particular. My husband owns a restaurant. That should not be a surprise. We're headed over there right now. Actually, I built a bot for the chef to write his newsletters because he gets all hung up, like he's worried about his grammar not being perfect. I was like, I got you. So building custom GPTs has been just absolutely wonderful. There are a bunch of custom GPTs inside of my courses that are trained on my frameworks. And that's a great way to be able to provide support to my students when I can't physically be there. So kind of making a second brain is really great. I use Claude a lot as well. I use Claude as kind of like a bouncing ideas off assistant. I feel like it does really well at that for me. And then my platform is Circle, where my courses are housed, and Circle lets you build your own agents in there. So those are the support inside of my courses. So I love it. I use it a lot every day. And then I also use it like help me change my light switch when my light switch dies, you know, which is not yoga related, but still very useful.
Yeah, the tech support uses for it are super helpful. I've found I've been using it for like if I get stuck on just I don't know, some software or something I'm trying to do online that's very technical and I get stuck and you can just screenshot it and be like, which button do I press? Like saves
Yes.
so much time.
Yep.
Uh, that's awesome. Also, Descript. You didn't mention Descript.
Oh yes,
Descript for
our friend
video
Underlord,
editing.
the
Yeah.
AI and Descript has just been a real time saver. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, we'll have to do an episode on AI now as well, now that I know you know all of the AI tricks. And lastly, what is the best business advice you've received that you wish you knew when you were starting out?
I actually did get this kind of early on in my career as a yoga teacher. It was that you, from an MBA, he said, you only need one idea, and then you just replicate that idea. And I was like, wait, what are you talking about? But looking back on it now, it's like he was kind of right. My first book was a book called The Athlete's Guide to Yoga. Like I said, I specialize in yoga for athletes. I'm like, yeah, a lot of the things I'm still doing, even now that my focus is more on teacher development and less on yoga for athletes, although I still keep a hand in that. It's like, oh yeah, I just needed this one idea. And then that was my next 5 books as well. You know, you just need this one workshop idea and then you can spin off of that. So you don't, if this ties back to the idea, you don't have to make it new and fresh every time. You just need one good idea and then you vary it, you iterate it, you develop it over time, you repeat it. Boom.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good ending. And I think we often get, I mean, I do get tied up in the idea of the professional development thing. You want to share things that you're learning personally, and you don't have to for your business side of teaching.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today, Sage. It has been such a pleasure to get to talk to you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and have some nice food at the restaurant.
Thanks, Adrienne. Yeah, the rest of my day is much shorter than yours. It's always fun to talk to someone in tomorrow. Have a good
Yes.
tomorrow.